by way of bad cartoon shows, that when you see Frankenstein, there's nuts and bolts coming out of his body, and he's got a limp, and he talks. It's emblematic of the grotesque. Not in the sense of, ugh, gross, but as a philosophical term. And so, what I like to say is that I think that the sublime and the grotesque is where most of the Romantic poets find their muse. It's not to say they scorn beauty, but there's usually this kind of edge. And it may be that which takes us beyond our common reach, or it may be that which at some level repulses us, which lacks harmony and identity. But the beautiful is more marked by a kind of balance, and these two speak to extremes on either side of that, and those are the two modes that I think are most important when you're studying the Romantics. We've talked a little bit about the radical politics, and we'll have occasion to revisit that. But again, let me just say, the works we're going to look at today were already considered dangerous. They monitored the likes of Coleridge and Wordsworth and Shelley and Byron. And so I think that it's important to remember that as a backdrop, because again, the bad cliche is that Romanticism is just about nature poetry. But sometimes what they're really doing is using nature as a means to say something altogether different, and trying to, if you will, talk in code to issues that are not just simply about nature. Maybe it would be better to say about the place of the human within nature in all of its realms of possibility, something akin to that. What they sought to do, I think I'll sort of come full circle here, they sought to explore the very realms of consciousness. They also were particularly interested in consciousness that untainted by events surrounding them, even though they fully recognized one could not escape those events. So with that in mind, what I thought I would do, rather than just talk about it in the abstract, is I want to start with, I'm not saying this is the first poem that Coleridge wrote, but it's very early in his writing, and certainly one of the first that he was willing to make public, put it that way. And that's the Aeolian harp. Now, maybe before we start reading, I think I have a copy I can put on the board here too, or maybe not. Before we start tackling the poem, what's an Aeolian harp? Yes, ma'am. Precisely. Could you hear that? Okay. It's a form of a harp that one places in the window, and the strings are played by the wind passing through the window. Now, and I think they're pretty cool. You can still buy facsimiles of these things today. But do you sense anything that might give one pause if we think about the music of an Aeolian harp as standing in for the music of the poet? Think of anything at all? What if the wind's not blowing? No music? See, that's a metaphor for the spirit of creativity. Now, in a certain way, it's a really understandable and apt image for Coleridge to use in the poem, because it can't be denied that these romantic poets were fond of looking to their inspiration to be found in nature. And we're not quite in the realm of the Industrial Revolution taking hold in England, but we're real close. We're real close. And so rather than look amongst the impoverished, the homeless, in stark contrast to the eminently wealthy and well-to-do aristocrats that were found in city life, that's why nature is, their choice. Nature is available to everyone, should we wish to seek it out. It is, if you will, democratic. It is not class-bound. And so that's we want to just keep this in mind as we're reading this this first poem. And as I say, not his first, but it's a very early poem by Coleridge, and it predates his rather notorious troubles that he experienced later in his life, which I'll spare you the details on, at least for the time being. Coleridge is just recently married when he writes this poem, but having said that, in the interest of full honesty, there were already some issues developing. He was in love with another woman, but nonetheless, that doesn't play in this poem. It sometimes plays in other ones. And so what we have here is just to quickly set the scene, and then I want to take it up by the poem itself. We have Coleridge and his wife who are lying outside on a blanket, more or less, and taking in the day. And so this poem attempts to capture that. They're also, of course, able to hear the harp from where they are, and that is, as I suggest, emblematic. It's a symbolic touch that he adds. But let's just go ahead then and walk in to this poem. Now, another thing you'll see is that it has stanza breaks, but they're uneven. In other words, it's not a precise line number, then I'm taking a break. You always want to, as it were, read the space. Meaning that for these romantic poets, they're very skilled at shifting the train of thought or the images they're providing as they move from one stanza to the next. And so there is implicit action being taken at the stanza breaks. And we usually see it allows the poem to take a turn in a slightly different direction. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and proceed. You've got copies, yes?
So.
Well, I'll read this one. We'll get your copies out later. You can read some of these other ones. All right, so the Aeolian Harp. My pensive Sarah, that's his wife, thy soft cheek reclined thus on mine arm, most soothing sweet it is to sit beside our cot o'ergrown with white-flowered jasmine and the broad-leaved myrtle, meet emblem they of innocence and love. And watch the clouds that late were rich with light, slow saddening round, and mark the star of eve, serenely brilliant. Such should wisdom be, shine opposite. How exquisite the sense snatched from yon beamfield, the world so hushed, the styly murmur of the distant sea tells us of silence. All right, so we'll get your attention there in that first stanza. Anything at all, just some quick observations. Anything jump out? Yes, ma'am.
Tells us of silence.
Yeah, which of course there's already an interesting irony going on. He tells us of silence while he's writing. You see what I mean? Because the communication is there. But yes, we have this pensive mood. And in part, given the title, what's that also suggest? The wind's not blowing. Translation, in terms of what I was trying to suggest before, his inspiration is not working right now. He's taking it in, but this becomes, we might say this is the first step. To attentively look to nature and to take in what nature offers, and most significantly, to see this endless dialectical motion between poet and nature, and see how it will progress as we move through the poem further. So here we've got a setting, and it's a congenial one, even if that first stanza closes with the word silence. But as we can see, as we move to the next stanza, that silence is now allowed to speak.